That happened. That happened. Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on volume 25, chapter 3. And things happen. I've read chapter 3 and chapter 4. And yes, rip. Rip. I knew this was coming. We all knew this was coming. There was a side of me that was hoping there would be kind of a little bit of a push here, which we'll get into as we get into it, because there's a little bit of flagging that we could probably piece some stuff together there, but we're obviously getting into the big final match, and I'm very curious to see how this kind of plays out. Of course, not the final match, because we still have a greater threat, but we'll get into it when we get into it. But as per usual, thank you guys for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday after Mushoku Monday. Don't go anywhere yet. As per usual, thank you, everybody that hits the like button, and babaka to anybody that doesn't hit the like button. I appreciate you guys' support, your kind words, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. But yes, more importantly, greatly appreciated by that sports channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. Zydonex with 9 months, Spud Monkey with 4 months. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. Inferno Torch with a super thank you, Inferno Torch. Mr. Shunshawn with a super thank you so much. Subra with a super, and Sergio Donna with 20 months. Thank you. It means so much to me. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. But with that said, let's just get into it. I don't have really much to talk about last week. Let's just dive into it. Chapter 3, A Shot at Victory. I had a little bit of frustration around Rudius. It's like, dude, why don't you use the monument? And then Zenoba shows up. He's like, hey, master, I used this. You remember that thing that you totally walked past? I used it. It's like, gosh dang it, Rudius. Rudius returned to a heated debate. Our foe is at our gates. We must get ready. So we should go and search for Rudius first. Edis was yelling at Sander. Roxy was there too. Doga's with him. They'll make it back eventually. In the meantime, we need to organize our forces and set up our trap. Like that blockhead would be any help. Poor Doga. Edis does not approve of Doga. Poor Doga. He's more capable than you think. Well, if we're talking about capable, how come you weren't with him? Well, that's... Ugh. She's not wrong. She's not wrong. Again, the only reason that Sander and Doga are there is to protect Rudius. And yes, he was ordered to do that. He was ordered to go there to the informant. But it still is like, yeah, that technically was your job. And I could see Edis being completely angry at him for not doing what he was supposed to do. See, the question was rescue or assuming he'd return. Edis was arguing to rescue Rudius, which he appreciated. Whatever, I'll go do it myself. Edis stood, spun on her heel, and met Rudius' eyes. If you're heading down, I'd recommend you going down to the altar, using the staircase in the shadow of the mushroom, and getting the blue water. Such a dumbass. Rudius! Edis responded to the helpful walkthrough by throwing her arms around him. She was going to snap his spine. I was worried about you. I'm sorry. Roxy and the others looked relieved that he was alive. He was a lucky man. By the way, what's with the arm? Oh, this? Look, I can explain everything at once. Only, before that, Reese looked around until his eyes met Sanders. You. Who are you? Like, are you really, like, is this the priority thing? I guess, yes, technically, sussing him out's kind of important at this point, but again, if Orsted okayed it, then he's not going to be anything of a threat. You can find out what he is later. But yes, technically figuring out what they're going to be doing going forward, he needs to know this information. North God Kalman II, Alex Ryback. That was not the biggest shock ever. That was the most obvious one out of them all at this point. The protagonist of the epic of the North God, who defeated the monarch of the King Dragons, slew a giant behemoth, achieved numerous glorious feats on the battlefield around the world, and eventually became one of the 7 great powers. He was the greatest practitioner of the North God style, and until a mere 100 years ago, was regarded as the greatest swordsman in the world. It's a bit. Got a really powerful person at his side. I'm super excited to see him in action. Like, of all the characters that are there, I'm most excited to see him in action. I want to see what this dude going to do. And yes, obviously, it seems like slight spoilers here for what we're going to get into in the next chapter. He is going up against Alexander. But it is interesting right here. It is confirming that he is one of the 7 great powers. Now, we're not really sure exactly how the North God itself is registered on the 7 great powers, and the idea that it could be registering all of them. But right here, Rudius is putting it that it's him, that it is Kalman II, which would make sense because that was probably the point which it was put on the 7 great powers was his actions, and thus there was never indication that that slipped off at any point, somebody took over. But it's kind of odd because later on he does say that he's fighting against 7 great powers, and it's like, he's technically not at this point. Like, none of them are on the 7 great powers that attack him in a bit. And that was how Sander introduced himself. Honestly, Rudius wasn't surprised. Yeah, you were. Okay, you started piecing it together with Doga. Now you're not surprised, but still, you were playing him down. Advanced swordsman, by the way. Part of him wondered what a guy like him was doing here, but it mostly made sense. Ariel. It made sense why Orsted assigned him to him, why Ariel sent him over Ghislaine and Isolde, why Doga was the North Emperor. He was North God Kalman II. Dude, beefy. I'm liking him. Why didn't you say anything? Just in case. The man god can see into people's hearts, but if no one on our side knew that was Kalman, I can conceal my presence. It made it easier to move too. That made sense to Rudius. He was sure that everything he knew leaked to the man god when he fell into the ravine, though. He wouldn't know that Kalman was on his team because he didn't know either. It's true. But then, if he could see into Sandor's heart, or Doga's, did that even matter? That's a really good point, and again, that all kind of predicates on if they don't have some way of blocking it too. Don't know. I kind of wondered at this point if possibly Kalman has a ring of disguise on, because you would think that he would have been at least spotted at some point during Rudius' travels with him. I would assume that possibly Rajerd would at least know who he is. It's kind of weird. Now, granted, technically Orsted immediately picked up on who he was, so I guess that makes sense that he doesn't have a disguise. Really? Well, to be honest, I kind of thought it'd be cool if I revealed my true identity at a crucial moment. Oh, granted, of course. Wasn't it futile after it came out that Doga was the North Emperor? I suppose, although Doga isn't especially well-known North Emperor. If Rudius had known the two of them were powerful warriors, he'd have tried to conceal them. Except if he had done that, maybe everything would have gone worse. Yeah, I can see it possibly. I don't know. I would probably see it going pretty much the same way because nothing has involved the two of them so far. The only thing that's really involved them so far was Doga, saving his life. But even then, he was out of the picture at the time. So it's not like anything they've done so far would have been dangerous because of that. And again, it does seem like Galfalion and Alexander knew who he was. Well, anyways, I'll be counting on you from here on out, Alex. Naturally. Only, please keep calling me Sander. That's the name I go by these days. Again, I would totally like to hear like a whole chapter of how he met. I mean, it does kind of summarize how he met Ariel, but I'd love to get like her perspective of that whole situation. After confirming his identity, they moved on to pull together info. 10 days earlier, Rudius brought the sword god Galfalion and North god Kalman III to the village. He hadn't felt the time pass on the ravine floor, but he'd been unconscious for a long time. It was a day or two later when the teleportation circles and tablets stopped glowing. That was what clued Edis and Roxy into the fact that something went terribly wrong. Something happened. Something happened. They came to the superb village to meet up with Rudius. They guessed the magic circles had gone out too, but they trusted Rudius was still active. It was Sander who had come straight back and told them Rudius was missing. He organized a search party and concluded Doga and him were in the ravine. With that in mind, they focused on the enemy's attack. This was due to the information that he'd gotten from the informant, causing him to get anxious. The informant told him a totally baseless rumor that the devils were the superb, and they'd murdered everyone in the surrounding area. Based on the rumor, the kingdom was mustering a hunting party. Yeah, even after Rudius met with them, that makes me believe the king is in cahoots too. I mean, you can make an argument the king himself was like, okay, I understand. Let's go figure this out. My two trusted people here go with him. And him not knowing that they were actually, again, Kalman and Gal. But right here, him still pushing forward with this whole thing. Unless, yes, they return with their disguise and said, yeah, they try to kill us. I guess both ways work. I see. Right. Backing up Sanders' info was a report from Edis and Roxy. They arrived yesterday. That distance should have only been a 4-day journey, but it took 10 whole days. They'd been held up by a huge ceremony at the capital that they had to push through. The decision to hunt the superb had broken into a kind of festival, and they possibly decided to hold a departure ceremony early in the midst of that. It should have been held off until later, but Geese probably got news that Rudius was tossed in the ravine and moved things up on the schedule. When Orsted's bracelet came off, that alerted the man god to his survival, so maybe he wanted a speedy attack on Orsted before Rudius got out. I can totally see that. Again, if that's their goal there, it kind of is surprising that they didn't send them back to take out Rudius in the ravine, because I think that would have been the quickest and more surefire method to get into them. Roxy and Edis had gone on some recon work around the early departure. This is what I was wondering, because like it said that it took them like 6 extra days to get there. It was because there was a celebration happening in the capital. It's like why did that add 6 days? That part wasn't clicking for me. Right? Okay, they were researching. Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about how they had to push through the ceremony. It was very difficult. It's like, that's not going to make it 6 more extra days. Go freaking round. I mean, it could be a huge capital, but I don't think it's going to be that huge. They confirmed the sword god and the north god had joined during that. As they did recon, though, the two of them couldn't shake some questions. How did this happen with the negotiations going? Where did Rudius disappear to? And before they knew what was happening, the hunting party set off from the capital. They're gone. They're gone. Edis and Roxy followed them anyways, keeping a close watch. They knew where the party was heading, but they thought maybe they can learn something. When they reached the second city, Roxy suggested that further pursuit was too dangerous. They circled the town and traveled through the forest to the superb village. After that, they got lost, wasted a few days, then arrived safely at the village. I guess both of them have like a problem with sense of direction. They went to the forest, got lost. I mean, you can get easily lost in a forest. Like it's easy to lose your bearings in a forest. Apparently, Edis and Rajerd had an emotional reunion. The moment Edis laid eyes on him, she'd been struck with an urge to pounce. Rhea supposed that she was consumed by the desire for him to see how strong she had gotten. She managed to hold herself back. She wasn't a child anymore. Ever since Rajerd had recognized her as a warrior, Edis had been a warrior. So as not to embarrass herself, she had to behave in front of her mentor. Telling herself this, she assumed her usual pose and said, "It's been a while. You look the same as ever, Rajerd." "Hey, Edis, you've grown." Well, duh. That sucks. I mean, I understand it. She doesn't, I mean, again, she respects Rajerd a lot. Again, this is her master, but there's still a side of me that like, girl, glomp. Girl, just glomp him. Go. Go, give him a hug. It sucks. I hate that whole sense of like having to act like an adult. Like you're not a child anymore, so you can't do it. Even if you're an adult, you could do that kind of crap. You could show that affection. Come on, girl, just go. If you want to do it, do it. Rajerd would totally accept it. Papa Rajerd would totally accept it. But yeah, I got a little choked up there. And it sucks because of how excited she was to go see him. And this is their exchange. She's like, let's go. Let's go, Roxy. Let's go back over there. We're done here. Let's go back over there. She was super excited to go see Rajerd. And it just comes down to, it's been a while. You look the same. Yeah, sure, duh. And that's it. That's their exchange. That was the extent of Edis and Rajerd's conversation. It was enough to fill her with nostalgia and pride. Before, she had to look up to see Rajerd. Now, they stood eye to eye. Damn, she's tall. I mean, I got a sense that she's tall, but as tall as Rajerd. Jeez. In battle, she could fight alongside him. Edis told Rudius all of this with a smug look on her face. She's so happy. She's so happy. We don't have much time left. The hunting party's probably heading this way as we speak, and I expect it won't take long until the ogre warriors join them. Okay, right. Here's my report. Rudius told them about the sword god, the north god, how they had a disguise ring, which Geese was probably using as well. Also, how he fell into the ravine, was seen by the man god, and how he escaped. Rudius, I'll kill Galfalion. Edis spoke with a low... She's gonna get him. Edis is like, I'm gonna get that boy. He touched my boy, I'm gonna get him. Edis spoke with a low voice, staring at the point where Rudius' arm met his body. Well, that is one option, but let's discuss it. I'm happy you want to avenge me, but I don't want you charging off alone, or you'll end up like I did. Geese was definitely in a position where he could manipulate the hunting party. Most likely, he disguised himself as a king. Rudius didn't know where the disciples were, but Geese had the sword god, the north god, and the ogre god on his side. The sword god and the north god scouted out the superb village, and the ogre god had gone with Geese to mount an assault on the office. What? What? When did we establish that? When did we establish that? Okay, it is obvious that there was an attack on the office. From their perspective right here, right now, yes, you can assume that the office was attacked because all the teleportations that they created have all died down. That place got attacked. Something happened there. Like Edis said, something happened. That's all we can really speculate at this point. Where did they get that the ogre god went there? Where did they get that Geese went there? Where did that part come from? Now, Zenoba adds a little more to it later on, but where did we get that specifically? That part doesn't make any sense. I don't remember them ever talking about the ogre god going over there. That's weird. They robbed them of any place to run. Then there was the other 100 or so members of the hunting party heading to the superb village. Ogre god Mara had been sent to Shariah. Again, where did we get that? Where did we discover that? Thinking about it again made Rudius' heart sink in despair. What happened to our house? Roxy looked down and Edis folded her arms. Sander stroked his chin, looking troubled. The ogre god may have just destroyed the office and then left. He might have gone on to attack Shariah too, but we have no way of knowing. Rudius thought about what he would have done. No one was in Shariah. No Rudius, no Orsted. There was no single person who could have stand against the ogre god. No way he would just leave. Even if Rudius didn't have the firepower, he'd probably attack anyway. Now, I guess it does show the foolishness of, again, wherever they got this information that the ogre god went there, because it by all signs, it looks like this is a different ogre that is at the battlefield. Because there was a side of me that almost thought that, like, the way that was the perspective was in the office when it was attacked from the receptionist scroll, that it was like playing it out like it was a female. Like it almost sounded like I think it even implied that it was supposed to be a female ogre. That there was a possibility that was like an interpretation there, and that Marta is actually a female. but it doesn't give that indication when it attacks later on. It seems like that is actually Marta. Like that's two different ogres. Like whatever was sent over there was just a warrior of their tribe, not actually Marta. So it does kind of show that foolishness of them assuming the ogre god went there, when in fact the ogre god will show up with them. Because it doesn't give indication that the rest of the ogres are with that hunting party. Like I said earlier, it does look like they pushed it up, and they're sending the hunting party first, and the ogres are separate. That they're still coming there. They're going to be late. And so this is two different groups. But again, it's kind of curious how they got this indication that the ogre god's there. The room was silent. Reese got the feeling that Orsted was glowering too. He couldn't know for sure through his helmet, but he was always glowering. He's not done with that joke. He's not done with that joke. Refugion's like, I'm not done with that joke. Dear me, I'm missing the gathering. A voice came from the entrance. Zenoba. Best boy Zenoba showing up with the actual logic here. Sorry I'm late, master. We just arrived. No, it's all good. I only just got here. Julie and Ginger was behind him. They were beaten up. There was scrapes all over them and exhaustion that had put dark shadows under their eyes. It looked like their magic was nearly exhausted. We had some trouble with invisible beasts along the way, you see. If the Superb had not come to our aid, we would have been in grave peril. Dang, yeah. When I got to this part right here, that clicked for me. Like, holy crap, that does technically make sense. Again, everybody that has come there so far, every party that has come there so far, Edis and Roxy ain't gonna have a problem. I mean, they're probably gonna get caught off guard. There's a little bit of danger there for Roxy, especially if she gets attacked first. But Edis is gonna handle him once they figure out where it's at. It's dead. Yes, when Rudius got there, he had a North God and North Emperor with him. He wasn't in danger. And then a Superb shows up. Everybody that has come there has like some really powerful warriors with them. Zenoba, alone with Julie and Ginger. Yeah, that's dangerous. There was a hope for me because he was talking about, yes, that if he's seen, let me know if you see any of the monuments on the way. My hope was that he was going to see the same one that Rudius seen, and he was immediately going to call to Petagoose and maybe get a familiar that will guide them there. But it looks like it went solo. Poor Julie. She looks so cute in the picture. Holy crap, she's growing up. Julie is growing up. But yeah, they look so beat up. Poor girls. At least Zenoba's a good tank. You keep them safe, hopefully. You don't say, okay, let those two lie down. No, you should tell us what you know first. You could sit in the corner and rest. Without a word, Julie and Ginger tottered off into the hall and sank next to a pillar. Roxy ran over immediately to cast healing magic on them. Okay, Zenoba, how much do you know about what's happening? The gist of it. I'd be grateful if you could explain it from the beginning. While it was annoying, being on the same page was important. He gave him a rundown. And so, our concerns are the hunting party that's coming this way. And what happened in Shariah? Zenoba gave a snort of laughter. Reese didn't recall saying anything funny. How interesting. On the way here, I found a monument of the 7 great powers. So I had Pedagoose's servant, Master Armanfi, confirm some things. Oh, Sanders stood with a joyful smile. Sanders such a geek, dude. He's such a geek, dude. Like, if there's any legendary warriors, that dude's a freaking geek for them. Sanders stood with a joyful smile. He looked around the hall, then sat straight back down again. Excuse me, and? He said your family is safe, Master. Relief settled over the room. They were safe. Again, this is what I would have done if I was in Rudius' shoes. I mean, he just literally got here, so it's not like he had much time to do anything. But it's like, yeah, I'd be zooping over there quick. Leo must have done his job, or someone else was protecting them. Maybe they saw the potential of an invasion of Shariah on the horizon. It did house the University of Magic, after all. Yeah, I can see them definitely having some sort of force to react to it. I mean, they did a horrible job reacting to Bodigatti, but Bodigatti bulldozed in there like super fast. It wasn't really a good response to that whole situation. I mean, they try to employ all the adventurers and whatnot, but it took them a while to get there. If Master Petagoose joins our forces, that would alone be enough to tip the balance in our favor. Sander looked around the hall with mild excitement. He's gonna join us! He's gonna join us! He's gonna join us! Zenoba, on the other hand, looked mildly troubled. No, Sir Petagoose apparently said that he would remain a spectator in this battle. I doubt we can rely on his aid. See, there's the problem right there. Again, what I was saying with Rudius is like, you really have to go up there and talk to Petagoose. Depending on how he words the whole situation, it could help. Again, this comes down to you had to utilize the Superb before, and you're going to have to use the Superb again. There's a side of me that almost wonders if he's going to end up showing up anyways. At some point, will end up showing up. Maybe help against the ogres when they arrive or something like that. Because he technically has something on the line here. Surely not. This is the sort of situation where he's the strongest. Sander recoiled in the way that Rudius thought was a bit melodramatic. Do you like Petagoose that much? No. He was the second North God. The first North God and Petagoose were old allies, back when they'd been the 3 God Slayers, which meant Sandor might be acquainted with him. Yeah, I think he'd be a perfect person to stand up there and talk to him if that's the case. I don't think he'd have any sway there. Like, I think the only person that's going to have sway there is going to be, yeah, the first. He might have even looked up to him, a man of his father's generation, known as a hero. Setting that aside, Sander was right. The power of Pedagoose and his familiars would be valuable here. There was no better reconnaissance agent than Armamphi the Bright, and Clear Knot of the Roaring Thunder had the ability to share info. Putting just those two together would throw their opponent's hand open and get their allies up to speed in an instant. In the legends about Pedagoose, this was how he stripped the enemy's army of everything. Yeah, that was the cool thing that I really liked about the familiars, even though our one example of them actually being in combat was them in front of the water god and not really doing much. Two of them just getting wiped out in an instant? It's like, they haven't really been too useful except for stopping Nanahoshi and Armamphi picking them up and getting food. But yeah, how they've kind of laid them all out. They all have some sort of critical role in every battlefield. It's like each one of them is a tool on this desk. They're not meant to be used for everything, but they're a tool specifically for this that together makes like the master plan. And that was just the beginning. Between all of his familiars, they had the power that could cover every eventuality. If he said they wouldn't help, though, that was that. Ors's policy was not to take help from Pedagoose anyways. Suck it up. In the end, suck it up. I hate this argument of like, well, Ors said no. I don't care. This is win or lose. Ors said unless you can step up and help, which you can't, it's win or lose. Suddenly, Orsted spoke.
Ogre God Marta might be rough, but he is decent. He wouldn't attack non-combatants. If it had been Galfalion or North God Kalman III, they would have attacked Shariah.
That kind of makes me believe that, yeah, I still think it's probably like the wife of Marta or something like that. Or again, it might be a situation where even though Ruius thinks that Marta is a male, it's probably the female that attacked the office. But this makes me believe that it's two separate people. And that, yes, she technically is going to apply the same mentality as Marta himself. He's going to be bestowing that upon his tribe, that you're not going to attack non-combatants. Which makes sense. Based on the history that we've gotten of the Ogre tribe, they have been through some stuff. And so I can see them feeling like they can't sacrifice non-combatants. And it probably a lot has to do with that prince that came and saved them, that he probably instilled that upon them, the worth of life. Ors's voice was soft, but it carried well. Was that soft enough?
Ogre God Marta might be rough, but he is decent. He wouldn't attack non-combatants. Geese, however, is a coward. Through those other two, he confirmed that I was here. Because there was a teleportation circle, he couldn't rule out the possibility that I might return to the office. Thus, he sent Ogre God Marta. Even for me, it would take some time to defeat the Ogre God. In the meantime, Geese, or some ally of his, went around breaking the magic circles. He may have planned this from the start.
That right there confirms, again, I don't know my assumptions that Ors did upon this whole situation happening over the last 10 days, ran back to the town to check, but then he would have known what Pedagoose had to tell Zenoba. Again, not sure exactly how they... I'm going to let that die. I keep bringing that up. I don't know how they found out about this. But this is interesting, though, because it is confirming at this point, according to Orsted, that they did go around and take out all the other magic circles. Not just the ones at the center. They went around breaking the magic circles, which implies the things that are not tied to the office. We'll see. So that was Ors's theory. Geese only brought the Ogre God along as a safety net. That safety net had protected Ruius' family. Then, he might not have meant to attack Shariah in the first place. Ruius came first, his family later. Yeah, like I said before, there is a, ease of taking something out / priority list to this stuff. And I really do think it comes down to Ruius first, because if he survives and the wives don't, he could still reproduce. And the last one will be Orsted, because again, Orsted by himself doesn't seem to have the ability to take down the Man God. Again, the Man God himself says, he's fine, I got him, he's easy. Then why didn't all three of them go?
I believe that's because the goal of Galfalion and North God Kalman III differ from Geese's.
There's a connection right there, because I was talking about that before, where one thing tipped me off when Galfalion and Alexander attacked Ruius. They said something to the effect of, this isn't our goal anyways. And I was kind of wondering if that would have been possibly what Geese said, or if that was them specifically. Here's kind of, through theory, is confirming sort of that's the mindset it's going with here, is that yes, they didn't really care if Ruius died or not. Their goal, again, in the end, is Orsted. They don't give a rat's butt about Ruius. He's weak. Just, he fell in the ravine. You think he'll come back out? I don't know. Whatever. Let's get out of here. Everyone looked confused, except for Edis. She knows. She knows exactly what their goal is. Actually, no. And this is kind of interesting because later on it sort of implies that I believe Edis knows what Galfalion's goal is, but it sort of implies later on that she never got a hint that he wanted to pass that on to her, which is kind of interesting. Because Galfalion wants to fight you, right?
As does Alexander Ryback.
Orsted was in the Superb Village. The Sword God and North God knew that, which is why they stayed rather than go to Shariah. From that, Rudeus got a sense that Geese didn't entirely have those two under control. And again, that sort of implies to the idea of what Geese was saying originally when he first got Galfalion, something feels off. I feel like I'm missing something. And it probably is mostly the idea that you can't control this dude. And I mean, that comes down to the original whole idea of going around and picking up all these people. He was kind of pointing out the idea, these people are crazy. A lot of these people are crazy. They're scary people. But there's a sense there that a lot of these people that they could manipulate them, but there is a fear that they're not all right and they're not controllable in the end of the day. The man god can offer a lot of things and play into their dreams and desires and save them and ask for a favor in the end, but they're still uncontrollable. They could have climbed down in the ravine and killed him if that was what they were after. Even North Emperor Doga managed that. They weren't doing what Geese and the man god wanted from them. Hint again, wasn't their goal. Well, I know my family's safe. And again, I'm curious where they get this theory that originally they all wanted to go to Shariah and attack Shariah. Why? Again, that's the question, why? Why did they get that idea there? Unless originally that was the plan until they realized that Orsted went to the village. I think, yeah, if Orsted never came there to help the Superds and find the cure, that would have meant that if they went there to attack their hub, they were going to be facing off against Orsted. And in that case, yeah, I can see Geese pulling all of them to go directly there. Well, I know my family's safe, so that's a relief at least. Though I can't really be relieved when the Sword God and the North God and the Ogre God are about to attack us. So 3 God tier warriors, plus another 100 in the hunting party. On the Superb side, they had fewer than 20 warriors who could fight, plus the folk here. Interesting to finally get a number there, that they have 20 Superb warriors that can fight. Kind of gives an indication of just how small this village at this point is, which we're going to get a sense there because, again, they've been hunted down for so long. Orsted, Zenoba, Genji. Orsted, Zenoba, Ginger, Julie, Norn, Cliff, Elise, Rajerd, Roxy, Edis, Sander, and Doga. The Superb women and children, along with the medical team, were staying in the village. The medical team was one thing, but the hunting party had its sights set on the Superb. If they breached the village, all of them could end up dead. Ginger, Julie, and Norn weren't fighters. Cliff wouldn't be much help in the fight either. Come on. He's a little cowardly, but he's a good healer. You got a good healer right there. As for Orsted, he wouldn't fight either. He was practically incapable of recovering mana, and his max amount went down as he used it. That was weird when I read it. Like, that was a moment when I read that line, I immediately DM'd some people like, when did they establish this? This is kind of like the whole thing with the Ogre God that I'm getting into it again. Like, this entire chapter is a bunch of things like, when did we establish this? Implying here that, yes, he's incapable of recovering, practically incapable of recovering mana. Yes, we've already established before that his mana recovery is super slow. And so, yes, that's why he expended a whole bunch of it with Rudeus. He can't do that again, and he has to recover enough for the end fight. And so that's why Rudeus has to handle everything and that Orsted can't get involved. Here it's saying specifically his max amount went down every time he used it. As he used it. Which means that, like, he has a max capacity of mana, and right now, since he fought Rudeus, it depleted a bunch of it, and he's got to build it back up. But every time that he uses it, the max amount comes down. When do we establish that? Now, I can argue, in a sense, it sort of I'm sorry, I'm overcooking this. I love these mechanic things. This is the stuff I eat it, by the way. That's why I talk about them a lot. I like mechanic stuff. I can see it makes sense because technically his max capacity is the point in which he fights the man god. And so, yes, every minute that goes by, his max capacity comes down, and thus every time he uses it, the amount of time he has to regenerate it comes down, thus the max capacity comes down. So it does technically make sense in that sense, but I've never heard of like an actual physical amount that is being capped every time he uses it, which is weird. I kind of wonder what the idea is behind that. Reese had become a follower to compensate for that. He couldn't ask Orsted to take over just because there were going to be a fight. Tossing him onto the battlefield as a last resort meant putting him up against 3 god tier warriors. He'd have to burn through a ton of mana. Even if they avoided that, there was still the fact that he didn't know what Geese looked like. Maybe he still had some backup forces. If Rudeus was in his shoes, he wouldn't send an old moron he thought was going to get brushed off. He'd give them a surefire plan. Orsted was the queen at the back of the board. Sure, Rudeus could win that exchange if he brought him out, but Orsted would be taking out the next move. Unless there was nothing else for it, it was better for Orsted to stay back. Again, don't fault him for that one. 3 god tier warriors without Orsted It wasn't going to be an easy fight. It would be tough, but not so tough that they couldn't win. They had 3 strong fighters: Sword King Edis, North God Sander, and the North Emperor Doga. And Water King Roxy? Like, Water King Roxy? Hello? You're going to bring up Sword King Edis, but you're not going to bring up Water King Roxy? Like, hello? I mean, yes, technically Edis probably at this point is much higher than Sword King. Let's be honest. She's at least Emperor at this point, but still, it's like, come on. You have Roxy too. She could pew pew from a distance. Come on. And you could still put together that mecha suit for Julie. Come on. If Rudeus worked with Zenova and Rajur to support them, it wouldn't be easy. But whether they fought or fled, it wouldn't be totally impossible. This all-out battle felt a bit poorly planned by Geese. Rudeus' allies were all gathered in the village right now. It would be one thing if he thought Rudeus wasn't there, but the man god knew he was still alive. Rudeus was here, and so was Orsted. Was Geese really going to try for an all-out battle now? Yeah, this does make me really assume that at some point there's going to be a massive rug pull. I mean, with what we see that happens at the end of Chapter 4, it just seems like, okay, things are going a bit too easy. I really do feel like there's going to be a rug pull here soon. Etoff will show up and she's going to turn on Rudeus. That would be so jacked up. Though, he may have thought that Vita would be having Rajur turn against him. Him along with the Sword God and North God would have been a total knockout. That'd be what he was counting on. With that in mind, it was fair to say that he now looked like he was down on pieces. Though you could also parse that it was sheer luck on Rudeus' part. Yeah, there's been a lot of plot armor over the last couple chapters, dude. The info they had conveyed the same sense, that Geese didn't have Galfalion and North God Kalman II totally under control. And again, I do really feel like that was probably what Geese was talking about back there. I'm missing something. I'm missing up on something. It made Rudeus wonder how he'd gotten them to work for him. He offered them conditions that they would accept. That would be why they were so desperate to attack. Conditions that had come up in this conversation. Again, Orsted. And I do feel like, and I was talking to it back then, I really do feel like the man god has put into play things that would have eventually pushed them in this direction. Now again, Geese is the one that comes in there and gives them that final statement, like, yeah, come fight Orsted. Yeah, you want to be a hero? Come defeat Orsted. But I think a lot of what has led them to that desire point that they're at right now, when he first confronted them, was the man god. Yes, technically it's through their dreams, talking to him, whatever, but their life pushing him in that direction. The guys who attacked Rudeus wanted to fight Orsted. After seeing him, they were ready to fight, which again, I'm surprised they actually walked out of that village. Geese had set up that encounter for them. Continuing that idea, Geese had assumedly sprang into action as soon as Rudeus had fallen. He even sped up the departure of the hunting party, the one that was meant to set off with the Ogre warriors. He'd have known that Rudeus would struggle to get back out of the ravine, and tried to finish things while he was out of the picture. And I can see that. Again, I can totally see that. Geese, knowing Rudeus wasn't dead, hadn't waited sending off the hunting party to strike a crushing blow on Orsted. Geese had been busy, and so was Rudeus. Rudeus was back, and things had settled into place. It was possible he'd realized Sander's identity. Also, going off how harried the man god had been, this seems like our shot at victory. Just as Rudeus said that under his breath, a young, superb warrior came in. The hunting party has come. They're about half a day away. Rudeus made it back in time, but only just. Damn. Yeah, that really does. The fact that they're a half a day away really does make me believe that, yeah. I mean, again, they were talking about that when Edis and Roxy were coming down here. They know that with the celebration and everything. It does feel like the moment that Rudeus fell in that ravine, he was trying to push it forward. And unfortunately for him, things didn't play out that well. And again, a lot of that has to do with Etoff. Etoff's arms, I think, is the main reason they got out. Without Etoff's arms, I don't think they would have gotten out there that very fast. Because Rudeus would have been in a much more critical state. He wouldn't have been recovered that fast. Yeah, Doga did a good job of wrapping him up, but there's like two sides of this. One side that he probably would have still bled out and would have still died, even though Doga had wrapped him up, just through sheer shock or whatever and massive blood loss. But on the other side, even if he did wrap him up really well and Rudeus did not bleed out, he would still be in so much pain and not recover that fast. Now, eventually, yes, he'll regain consciousness and he could close off those wounds, but I still think him regaining consciousness would have taken so much longer. Those arms attaching to those lost points of his limbs was probably a big reason why he recovered so fast. The ravine of the earthworm, it was, on average, 400 meters across, 100 at its narrowest, 500 at its widest. The Superb has suspended a bridge across the narrowest point to get across. They crushed up and smeared herbs that repelled the invisible wolves all over it. Their enemy were many, but this is the only way through. Unlike a river, the ravine couldn't be crossed easily. They would have to stop here. If they took down the bridge, it would buy some more time. Yeah, I kind of had this mental image, like, even if they break the bridge, there's going to be, like, the ogre comes up and just, like, slams down this massive pillar and everybody just runs across it. Or start catapulting people across, what they kind of do. Also, unlike the forest, there was no obstructions there to stop the eye of distant sight. That put them within Rudius' firing range. Let's leave the bridge. Yeah, that was my assumption there. Is like, Rudius, like, completely nuked the hell out of Orsted. Do that crap again. Just nuke the other side, like, big time. No, just lightning. Let's leave the bridge. They could bring it down if the hunting party came across it. Once you fell in, there was no picnic getting back out. There wasn't time to set up a trap, but they decided to wait for the enemy there. Right now, they were fielding 6 players. Edis, Rajerd, Zenobia, Sander, and Doga. The 6 of them would take on 3 god tiers. The Superb warriors would focus mainly on the hunting party. Reese had something else for Roxy to do, which is why he didn't bring her up earlier, I know. So she'd be stationed at the back. I wonder what he's having her do. The only thing I can think of is maybe possibly she's trying to work on figuring out a way of teleporting back to the town, Shariah, in order to get the Mark II. But I mean, the assumption is that the ogre, when it attacked the office, like, went down to the basement and destroyed that, because all the teleporters are gone. So I'd assume whatever the teleporter is that's waiting to be activated to bring in his armor, that's been destroyed too. I don't know, there's a possibility he may have another one somewhere else, or possibly just trying to put together a makeshift one. But she's probably doing something of a magic circle in the back. Annalise and a few other Superb would be her guard. Cliff and the others would protect the village. It was a pretty traditional battle arrangement. Warriors in the front line, magicians in the back. They could also send anyone who got injured back to the village to get healing. Speaking of healing, Reese decided to leave Etof's hand where it was for the time being. Right now, their time, as well as the scrolls that Roxy and Zenobia had, were limited. The new arms seemed to have better specs than his actual arms, so he left them on. Like, yeah, these got a little bit of plus attack on them. I'm going to keep them. He get his real arms back after the battle. It was a present from the Demon King, so he was going to have some fun with them. Get your mind... Get your minds out of the gutter. I seen that last week, Nickmer. You get your minds out of the gutter. This is probably where everybody's, like, sus comments came from. I got them. They were present from the Demon King, these arms. I'm gonna have some fun with them in the fight, not something else. It technically does. It does make you wonder. Does Etof feel what he feels? Not gonna stop. Shut up. Half a day later, they were staring down the 100-strong hunting party across the bridge. 3 men stood in the front, on the other side. A middle-aged man with a sword at his belt, sword god Galfalion. He already relinquished his title to another, and he was seriously getting on in years. His skill with the blade hadn't deteriorated, though. Then there was a kid with a giant sword slung on his back, North god Kalman III, Alexander Ryback. He was one of the 7 great powers, but his strength was an unknown quantity. Again, did he take it over from Kalman II? Or are they both listed there? That's the question mark. I don't remember them ever implying that he took over the placement on the 7 great powers. Both of them have been listed in this one chapter as the one that's on the 7 great powers. Then, standing nearly 3 meters tall, broad as the trunk of a giant tree and wearing a necklace that looked like a bell on it, and a tiger-striped loincloth, was a red ogre. That was the ogre god, Marta. Orsid's guess was that he hadn't attacked Rudius' family, but he didn't know for sure. Rudius wondered if he should thank him for that, but chose not to. Hey, arigato, by the way. Thanks for not tagging my family. He attacked the office, which meant grim things for the elf girl on reception. He tried to remember her name again. Faradis or something. He never actually remembered her name, but still wanted to avenge her. Elf receptionist, I will avenge you. No sign of Geese, huh? Disappointingly. I mean, we've already established that he has a disguise ring, so I'm not sure if you'd be able to see him. Disappointingly, he didn't see a monkey face. He could be back at the second city. He wasn't in range of the eye of distant sight. Yeah, I wouldn't be there if I was Geese, because again, Rudius could nuke that entire other side and he'd get trapped into it. He technically does. He wasn't in range of the eye of distant sight. That was Geese for you. If he didn't have things totally under control, he might have decided to throw it in at this time and do a runner. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt at this point. Unless, again, which I assume is going to happen, is that there's going to be a rug pull at some point. So at some point, there's going to be a massive rug pull. It just, because again, spoiler for next chapter, we got one down already, and it's like, I don't really necessarily see this being that difficult. of a layout of what they currently have. The biggest unknown right now is really the Ogre God, I think. But yeah, with the whole thing with Vita happening and Rudius surviving the fall into the ravine, I could totally see him cutting and running. Like, oh, man, we'll do something else later on. We'll figure it out later. We'll start a new plan. There was scared faces amongst the hunting party as they seen the superb warriors, devils out of fairy tales. If they won this battle, Rudius would sell reserved pamphlets on every street corner in Berhel Kingdom. There's nothing to fear. We far outnumber them. The 3 god tiers weren't scared, though. Alexander was particularly peppy, waving his fists in the air and giving a rousing speech. It was true, the hunting party beat them in numbers, but he was wrong. They were in the forest and had superb, so they had the advantage. The hunting party drew their swords as they glared across it with open hostility. Then Alexander pulled his sword from his back. My name is Alexander Ryback, the 3rd North God Kalman. Follow me, and together we shall have glory. With that, Alexander set off across the bridge, howling. So stupid. This is so stupid. There's just something in this family's blood. There's just something in this family's blood. Sander gave the signal, and Rudius fired stone cannons from both hands. They flew straight at the base of the suspension bridge, smashing it into pieces. Rigerd, in front of Rudius, also made his move. He sliced through the vines that supported the bridge with his spear. Ah! Everyone watched in amazement as the bridge fell. North God Kalman III went plunging down into the abyss. Everyone stared in amazement, even Sander, who gave the order. He's like, stupid kid. Stupid kid. No way, Rudius thought. That did not just happen. You gotta be kidding me. Well, he figured there was no coming back from that fall. It was Alexander, so he might. Yeah, everybody knew he was coming back up there. Still, even if he survived, it was going to take him a while to climb back up again. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be... Dude, the moment I read that line, I'm like, oh, Rudius doesn't know, does he? Like, I immediately thought about, like, back when Geese went and met him. Dude was zipping and dipping all around a freaking behemoth. A massive behemoth is launching up on hind legs, and he's just flipping around him and zooping up and down him and cutting him up. He's going to run up that damn wall without a problem. Okay, that's one down. No one cheered. No one looked angry either. The shock of what just happened burned into everyone's minds. This was their chance. Rudius concentrated magic into his hands. The list of people who could attack right now was pretty damn short. Lifting his left hand in the air, he sent up a massive surge of mana, creating thunderous clouds. Then he used his right hand to subdue the raging magical energy, to compress it and bring it down. Lightning! A crackle of impending thunder rolled in. A bolt of lightning flashed down. His own vision went white. Then there was a crash. Thunder boomed around them in a full swell. A cloud of dirt rose on the opposite cliff. Flames engulfed the trees that fell to the ground. He couldn't tell how much damage he had done, but he felt it. He felt how strongly his hands shook. It was a sense that he had killed people. He pushed down his nausea, then concentrated his mana into his hands again. Still something he's not going to get over, which is kind of cool. I mean, it sucks, obviously. This whole thing sucks, but especially since a lot of these people are being misled. That's the sucky thing about it. I mean, that's just like war. These people are being misled. They're coming here thinking that these Superb have killed people. I mean, even Alexander. He believes that Orsted is evil, that he needs to take him down. These are misled people. Most of these, besides, the only one that I don't know about is the Ogre God. Galfalion obviously knows what's going on, but everybody else in that other side truly believe the other side's bad, which is honestly what makes it kind of interesting, that idea that no side is technically the bad guys. But even still, at this point, Rudius still doesn't like the idea of killing or taking lives. One more shot. A second later, a red shape came hurling out of the dust cloud. The leap was effortless at this distance, silent, like it was flying. Its momentum was overwhelming. The red shape closed in at a startling speed and made impact. Impact was the only word for it. There was a bang and a cloud of smoke like a cannonball. A red-skinned ogre and 40-something-year-old human, Ogre God Marta and the former sword god Galfalion, had jumped across the ravine. A 100-meter jump. I'm surprised it took this long. I'm literally surprised it took this long. I assume that these people would probably be able to pull that off easily. Just mainly on the idea of how fast they are. With that speed of how fast they are, jump, that momentum's going to keep you going. 7 great powers on full display. Again, the sword god might still be on the 7 great powers, and again, Rudius is still kind of classifying him as still the sword god. Like, his ability has not gone down. He lost the title, but he should still be on that 7 great powers list. Ogre God's not on it, unless they're classified as something else, which I don't think so. Technique god, dragon, fighting, demon, death, sword, north. No, that's not. There's no ogre god on there. Anyways, it's a big deal.
Right. Who's gonna fight me?
He was a grinning wolf. When last Reese faced him, he seemed a bit dopey. This was different. This was a battle with mortal stakes. His belt held what was probably a magic sword. This wasn't like the one the armor had stopped. Reese felt a cold sweat trickle down his back. I'd be terrified. I'd be freaking terrified. That's me. Stepping forward like was a foregone conclusion came a red-haired mad dog. She had 2 swords at her hips. She folded her arms and placed herself imposingly in front of Galfalion.
Yeah, that figures. Who else?
I like how he assumes it's not just Edis. Anybody else? I just don't really figure that it's just gonna be you. Anybody else? Like this is a war right here. There's no like duel of honor or whatever. Like even how things kind of unfold later on, it's like I don't even feel bad. Like because this isn't about honor. This isn't about equality. This is war. This is you're dead if you don't step it up. And whatever you can put at your disposal, do it. Again, that's what I loved about Etoph. The way that she put that. Doesn't matter. Who else has come with you? Bring everything at me. Your allies is part of your strength. Come at me. Bring everything.
Yeah, that figures. Who else?
Me. Galfalion scoffed.
Well, look good for a dead man. Looking good for a dead man.
Alive and kicking, actually.
I told you we should have cut his head off.
I called it. I called it. We should have cut his head off. I wonder if that's a reference to after or before. That's the thing I'm curious about. Was that a reference to after or before? I think later on it does mention the idea of specifically go for his arms. So it was actually put that way. He was told to not go for his head. It's very interesting. They wanted to trip up somebody. We'll get into it in a minute. They wanted to trip up somebody. So I'm glad that my whole theory there was correct. I didn't see too many people getting angry at my sweating over that, but it's like, for me, it didn't make sense that he didn't just cut off Rudius's head. He's standing in front of Rudius, by arm. Why not just go for his head? You had the jump, and you can do it in a split second. Why not just chop off his head? He was told not to. He wanted to. He's told not to. Rudius wondered who he was directing that at. Geese, supposedly. There was one more of them. He didn't say his name, but beside Rudius stood a brave, bare-handed warrior with green hair and a white spear in his hand. The 3 of them reunited. And I'm getting when I read this the first time, I got freaking goosebumps. It just came out of nowhere like, oh, it just hits. The 3 of them were reunited. Edis, Richard, Rudius. The 3 of them were going to fight together. Dead End was back. Dead Endo is back. Dude, again, like I said, goosebumps. It's so stupid. This got me all worked up when I read that. It's just the way it's laid out. Because they technically got together earlier. They were in the village. But it's right here where Rudius finally just goes, Dead End's back. Too bad they couldn't fight together. 3-on-1, but Rudius didn't see anyone complaining. Yeah, you don't have no right to. What do you think Galfalion's going to say? Aw, you guys are ganging up on me. No. Let's go. This is a fight. I don't care. I don't get to choose my enemies. The plan had been for Rudius and Sander to fight Alexander. But when the kid went and when the kid went and screwed himself over with the dumbest move, Sander, Zenoba, and Doga would take on the Ogre God, who focused on hand-to-hand combat. Zenoba and Doga were crazy strong against powerhouse-type characters. Sander, North God Kalman II, was supposed to have experience fighting big enemies. They were a perfect combo. They could win. They might lose someone along the way, but even so, they could beat these 2. Again, I don't think that's it. I think somebody else is going to show up. There's probably somebody attacking directly to the back into the village. I bet they found another way across somewhere else. The idea that this massive ravine doesn't have another point of entry is mind-boggling. Or again, jump across. Find another spot that has about 100 point, jump across. Which again, technically right now, we do have one last person that has not been mentioned, Bodygotti. I mean, he's gonna eventually show up with that golden armor, and I bet he's gonna attack from the back. It's probably a case where it's taking him some time to get there. He probably had to go get that armor. Technically, it's in the bottom of the ocean, which makes you kind of wonder, like, how the hell does he get down there that fast? I mean, he runs freaking fast. I mean, he plowed through the northern region. But like swimming down to the depths of there, he probably got somebody else to help him, like maybe a sea folk. It just depends on how long it's going to take for him to join the fight. And I think he really is probably going to join within the next couple chapters, because I think he's going to join them mid-fight and throw him off when he's fighting Ogre God and Calman III. Yep. Looking back to the shout behind them, Rudius seen something fly up the cliff. It was a black-haired kid, the one that had fallen in the ravine. Breathing hard, he mopped his brow and lifted his sword high. Then, like it was a theater production, he proclaimed, "I'm the North God Calman III. I will slay the cursed god of evil, Orsted, and become a hero. Anyone who would stand in my way may challenge me if they dare." Rudius was shocked. He ran up from the bottom. To be fair, while it was a cliff, it wasn't totally vertical. He probably ran up, stabbing the sword into the wall as he climbed. That was the 7 great powers for you. "Nothing for it then," Sanders said. "Master Rudius, shall we take this bonehead?" "Yeah." Rudius nodded at him. It was disappointing not being able to fight with Edis and Reserved. "Yeah, it sucks. Back to the original plan. Watch out for that sword. It's the strongest in the world." There was only one sword fit for the North God to wield. The legendary Great Blade, forged after the defeat of the monarch of the King Dragons, Kajakut, the King Dragon Blade. Yeah, I'm kind of curious now they brought this one up. I'm curious when they're going to bring up the other blade that Geese is having made, which that might be something that Bodygotti ended up bringing. Because I don't think it would be the one that Galfalion has, because I think they would have pointed that out already. I think that was one of his. But I mean, that could have been something that he gave him at some point. I think it was one that was supposed to be an immortal demon king killer, or assumed. The Blade's master, however, was gaping at them, sword still raised. "Well, why are you here?" The voice of the North God Calman III, Alexander Ryback, trembled as he looked at them. Rudius wondered if he was surprised to see that he survived. Come on, Rudius, come on. Maybe he hadn't heard it from Geese. No, he wasn't looking at Rudius. He was looking at Sander, which made more sense. "Dad!" Maybe that shout signaled the beginning of the battle. Or maybe it was a question of timing. The Ogre God Marta swung his arms up and brought them crashing down to the ground. The ground thrusted up, the cliff crumbled, and a row of trees toppled. And that is chapter 3. Damn, dude, things picking up. But let's move on to chapter 4, the Mad Dog King versus the former Sword God. This was a pretty interesting fight. This is the kind of stuff that I like, that despite the fact that it seems very quick and very kind of like, that was it. Like, there's no like, they clashed swords, then zoomed over here, then clashed swords, then zoomed over here and clashed swords, and boom, 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 which probably the anime is going to totally do. I totally see the anime just trying to ramp it up with like a spectacle of like just darting all over the place and slices and whatnot. It's very simple and like it's like literally like 2 attacks. But I more so like the fact that amongst it, there is a story being told. And it's kind of, it's sad. It's honestly sad in the end. It's really sad. It doesn't feel good in the end. That's the thing. It doesn't feel good in the end. Edis and the others were far away from the ravine. This is because the moment after the Ogre God moved, Galfalion started running for the battlefield. "You prefer this spot?" They were inside the forest when Gal came to a halt. Though it was a relatively open area, barely a minute passed, but Gal was fast. They'd run a significant distance from the ravine. Edis was a bit nervous about leaving Rudius, but she focused her attention on her enemy.
"The Ogre God doesn't distinguish between friend and foe when he goes into his rampage. Let's stay out of his way."
Gal squared off against Edis, not drawing his sword, as if to say that he was happy to do it barehanded. To Edis, his stance looked wide open to attack. She raised her own weapon, the Phoenix Dragon sword, above her head. Her opponent was still the former sword god. She wasn't quite sure if she should attack that opening.
"You look well."
Unexpected pleasantries. Then again, Gal was a person like she was. There was nothing weird about them saying words. On the other hand, given the situation, hearing this man reach for words instead of swords was, to Edis at least, fairly strange. Yeah? Cocking her head suspiciously, Gal scoffed.
"Remember Gino? Gino Britz?"
"Yeah, I remember the guy. Nothing special."
"Yeah, him. He was strong for his age, but nothing special."
He looked up at the sky, trees swaying in the wind. There was no sign of birds or animals. In the distance, they could hear trees falling and something ripping. That was the sound of the Ogre God fighting. Possibly the North God. It was hard to say.
"Now he's the Sword God."
"I know."
"Do you now? Didn't think your ears were that sharp. You go there to see him or something?" "Ah, well, anyways, that's how it is. I surrendered the Sword God tile to him."
Edis thought back on how she and Rudius had gone there to make this enemy their ally. She hadn't met Gino Britz then. Even as he is now, he wasn't the Sword God. It didn't click for her. All she remembered was a sizable shock that she had finding the Sword Sanctum in a different state.
"What's that bastard's deal anyways? Going on about marrying Nina out of nowhere. So I told him, if he wants to marry Nina, he's got to be stronger than me." And what do you think that bastard did? He got stronger.
Gal looked properly amused, his mouth curved as he reminisced. Again, that was kind of my assumption there, because it was kind of indicating from Ors's perspective that he's a very wishy-washy person. And I could totally see that being an aspect that, yes, in this situation, because of what Rudius has sort of thrown off the timeline, he's basically made it to where Edis is there, and she basically encourages this relationship. And through that relationship, he gets strong. Through the power of love, he gets strong. It's cheesy, but it makes sense.
It was over in an instant. Even when I was young, I only swung a sword that heavy that fast once. Maybe twice. No, maybe I was never that strong.
He waved his hand as though he'd remembered something. His hand chopped in the air. With such speed, it seemed like it might produce a shockwave. He began to sweep it back, then stopped it short.
I don't strike twice, you hear?
Then he folded his arms again.
I don't get it, because ever since I was born, I was the strongest. I was born into this. I guess for normal folks, that moment comes when you must grow up.
He looked up at the sky again.
Not the strongest anymore, though, are you? Whatever. The brat got everything he wanted. The girl he was sweet on, the sword god title. At the Sword Sanctum, he's got everyone's respect now. Won't be long before Gino's the name people think about when they hear Sword God.
Gal finally looked at Edis, observing her straight on. Very interesting little bit right here. He's saying, I didn't strike twice, you hear. I don't get it because ever since I was born, I was the strongest. So he's literally saying, like, I'm so used to just being the strongest. And he came before me, and I'm like, I'm the strongest. Swing once, it always works, right? But it's implying, though, this didn't happen like that. I only swung a sword that heavy, that fast once, maybe twice. It implies that he was using a heavier sword. Huh. Maybe I'm reading too much in that, but it implies the idea that when he confronted him to fight, he was using something that was heavy. He was using a sword that was heavy, which does technically play into my theory on the fact that this was sort of set up in a way by the man god in order to trip up Gal and have him lose heart and then join him. But it implies that he specifically used a heavy sword. But yeah, it does play into the idea that, yes, he's used to always winning with that one single strike, which comes with a sword god concept, which is kind of interesting later on when it gets into the idea of when to use other styles but not being able to, and almost that literally being his end. But very interesting. But yeah, he got everything he wanted. It almost sounds like it's bitter, but it's not. That's the interesting thing. He's just, again, it technically does go the idea that he did make a promise to himself that he wasn't going to lose to anybody else. In that case, he did finally broke his own promise, his own oath that he was never going to lose to anybody else until he fought Orsted again. He looked up at the sky again. Not the strongest anymore, though, are you? Gal finally looked at Edis, observing her straight on.
What are you compared to that?
What's that supposed to mean?
Dragon God Orsted was your enemy, but you snared yourself a man, and now you're wagging your tail for him.
Gal let out a short laugh, but he wasn't smiling. There was rage in his face as he glared at Edis. Yeah, to him, she literally betrayed him.
I left you my dream. My dream was to crush that titan. The Dragon God Orsted. Moronic, thinking about it now. Why the hell did I entrust that to you? You've had your fangs all pulled out. Berserker Sword King? Ha! There's none of that in you now. Giving yourself a man's all well and good. But wife number 3? You settle for that?
He spat all this quickly, but none of it bothered Edis. She's like, I don't know what the hell are you talking about? All she could think of was, so what? She didn't remember him entrusting her with anything. Yeah, I kind of wonder about that, because again, she told him what she told him what he wanted, but I don't know that at least what we've seen from that perspective, I don't know that we've ever mentioned or had a moment where it had him literally saying, this is thing you're doing for me. Yes, he talked about it with Ghislaine and I forget who it was. I think it was I think it was Auber. He was talking to it with them, but I don't know that it ever showed him talk to Edis about that. He made it, oh, she's going after Orsa too. I gotta make her strong. You lost your nerve, huh? The sword god's pupils contracted. The murder in his eyes grew, concentrated, and shifted to his hands.
I expel you from our tradition.
Whatever. She cares. What? You want another title? No, I don't care. Okay. All right. I taught you all you need to know. I expel you from this place. I don't care. Because again, it's stupid titles.
I'll never let you call yourself a Sword King again.
Make me. If you think you got in you. She was ready to fight. If anything, she was confused as to why they were still talking.
You think you can beat me?
Obviously, you're nothing. I'll send your soul back to its maker with a single strike.
Ha! You know, that was the second time anyone's ever called me nothing.
Was the man god the other one? I think he said something about that. I think he mentioned that the man god told him that because we didn't get a perspective of him talking to the man god. It's so funny because like everything up until now feels like it's Galfalion trying to throw her off, but she just doesn't care. That's the cool thing about this. She's literally throwing him off, but he's trying to throw her off by provoking her. And again, they imply the idea of what he did to Rudius was to do that. She don't care. Yeah, she's ticked about what happened to Rudius, said I'm going to kill him. But right here, she's not letting it get her enraged. Galthalion readied himself, standing to conceal his blade. He widened his stance, lowering his weight, and put his hand on the hilt of his sword. It was a stance for the unbeatable strike favored by the Sword King, Ghislaine de Dolia. Eddis saw this and clenched her back teeth. The core of the Sword God style was striking with a heavy blade as fast as possible. Within that style, there were 3 stances. Mid-range stance, the basic stance of a Sword God that could counter any technique. I don't know if they've ever mentioned that before. I would assume they would have some sort of counters, but they would have been also on the idea of being aggressive, and a good defense is a good offense. So it's kind of interesting to see if there is a counter system. High stance, an aggressive stance suited for those that broke through the opponent's technique to push them back. And draw stance, a defensive stance suited for those who read their opponents and sniffed out the perfect moments to strike. Essentially, those who read their opponent favored the draw stance. Those who broke their opponent favored the high stance. Those who specialized in neither favored the mid-range. Eddis, who had a sense of rhythm and actively sought to break her opponents, favored high stance, of course. Of course. She's a mad dog. Ghislaine, with her beast folk smell and hearing, excelled in reacting instinctively. She favored the draw stance. Galthalion had assumed the draw stance. The former sword god could fight from any of the stances, but here he chose the draw stance. Again, does technically play into what he ended up choosing, which I thought was super fascinating. He judged that he could read Eddis. Even knowing that, Eddis wasn't afraid. She kept her breathing shallow and slowly closed the distance. In that moment, Gal felt something wrong. Eddis was strangely silent. As the name Mad Dog suggested, when she'd been at the Sword Sanctum, she bared her teeth and attacked with an idiot's directness. But now, she held back. She's different. And he hasn't seen her since she left there. And it kind of makes me wonder why they wouldn't have told him that. Which makes me wonder if they didn't have any plans for him to fight Eddis. But you would think that would be told to him. Like, Geese would tell him, do not downplay her. She's going to act a lot different than when you were actually first fought her before. There was one thing that hadn't changed. Her expression. She was smiling. There was a smug, unpleasant grin plastered on her face, even as she stood with the serenity of a monk in training. Looking at her face, Gal found himself wanting to close the distance and cleave her in half. He's like, that stupid grin on your face. Again, it seems like she's technically mocking him. He merely put his back to a giant tree and waited, as still as if time had stopped. Neither of them said a word. An unusual scene. If anyone who knew the two of them had seen it, it would have been utterly bizarre. Both liked to attack first. Only the bold rose to the top of the sword god ranks. They didn't move, but yet they were. It was slow, only a fingertip at a time. Eddis was closing the distance between them. Now they were just close enough for their sword tips to cross. Eddis was in striking distance, but too far for a decisive blow. They weren't close enough for their strongest attack. In a fight between Eddis and Nina, the first who moved lost. Nina had loosed a perfect sword of light, but Eddis had outdone her in speed. For Galthalion, outdoing Eddis would be easy. He could cleverly get out of her range, time it so the point of her blade reached its mark before his. He didn't, though. He stood unmoving. He didn't close the distance between them, nor change his angle. He stayed still and observed Eddis, as if they were the only two people in the world. Flag. Right there, flag. Oopsie. 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 By inches, Eddis got into range for a killing blow. She was in a position to use her ultimate, most reliable strike. Eddis felt a tiny flicker of uncertainty. Galthalion's defenses was perfect. If she used Sword of Light here and now, she thought she could come down, former sword god or not. But he was Galthalion. She remembered the moment of her humiliation when she first arrived at Sword Sanctum. She hadn't even seen him in the moment that he sent her flying. A moment later, he moved. He went in with perfect execution for a finishing blow. Sword of Light. She attacked with the most perfect technique in the sword god style. Gal's eyes caught it. The moment he gripped the hilt of his sword, it wasn't the reflection blade. It was unmistakably Sword of Light. It just wasn't like the Sword of Light Gal had ever seen. Water god style secret technique flow. A slippery sensation swiped across Eddis's palms. From her stance, with her sword raised above her head, she struck with a Sword of Light, met Gal's lightning-fast intercepting strike, and been deflected. She sliced the tree behind Gal in two in a diagonal. Just before their blades parted, Gal applied the slightest gesture, making Eddis's torso ever so slightly tilt. Still, in that position, at the end of her stroke, Eddis was knocked off balance. That was more than enough. With Eddis's defenses down, Gal's eyes found her neck. He struck back. Perhaps it was the price he paid for using the teaching of another, unfamiliar style, but his strike could hardly be called fast. It didn't reach the speed of light, speed of sound at best. At that distance, that range, you didn't need the sword of light to kill your opponent. Any strike to cut off their head would do. The blade came down like a guillotine. There was a sharp noise. Metal met metal. His sword stopped. It was digging into Edis's neck. But it had halted. Gao's eyes went wide. A man had appeared behind Edis. Green hair, white spear. He stood as if he were hiding behind Edis, blocking Gao's blade like a guardian spirit. If there had been a sword of light, Gao thought for a split second. Then, Edis's body twisted as she drew her sword from her right hip and raked it across Gao Falian's body. Gao swiftly leapt back, hitting the ground with a thud. When his legs reached the ground, his torso wasn't on top of them. Gao Falian's turned into Paul. Gao Falian got pawed. Gao Falian's upper half was airborne. It spun 3 times, then fell back to the earth. He watched as his legs slowly toppled over. He took in his defeat. Damn. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to break the flow here, so we're gonna pause here. I didn't want to break the big moment with Rajerd showing up. I love that. Just the mental image of that just gave me goosebumps. Just like literally going for the neck, and just boom, something stops it. And then he looks up, and all of a sudden, Rajerd just kind of comes out from behind her. You're not gonna hit my girl. You won't touch Edis. I'm gonna save her. I'm gonna protect her. Super good. Now, it was very interesting. Going back about here, okay, so yeah, his whole idea here, and he gets into it more later on when it talks a little bit about his mindset here, which is, again, kind of, it doesn't feel good. It feels bad, dude. It feels real bad. His mindset here is that he's going to wait for her to come to him, and it's interesting that he gets into it that he didn't use Sword of Light. He probably could have won if he did. And I was thrown off when I read Water God Style Secret Technique Flow, because I hate this about this book, and again, I don't know if it's Refusion that does it, or if maybe it's more clear in Japanese. I hate that they don't say who talks. So when I read Water God Style Secret Flow, I thought that was Edis. I thought she was going to go use a Sword of Light, and she switched to use Water God Style. And that would technically make sense. I didn't have the semblance that he would have used that, so it completely threw me off. Until it said that, yes, she used Sword of Light, and he used Intercepting Strike. Flow is an intercepting strike. It is a counter. It is a water style. So again, it gets into it more later on, so I'm not going to dig into it too much here. But I think the most telling thing about this entire encounter right here is how confident she was about Rajerd. She had full confidence in him, which is staggering if you think about now. Because again, she hasn't fought at his side for years. For years, she has not fought at his side. And even now, dead Endo's back, and she knows full damn well, because back there, he always had my back. I know he's got my back. It's just awesome. I love it. Freaking Rajerd just creeping up. Damn. He muttered where he lay, looking at the sky. He hadn't seen the Superb hiding behind Edis. Yeah, that is a side of me that, like, during that entire encounter, is so focused on how slow they're moving and what they're going to do. There was a side of me that almost like, that's true. They never mentioned Rajerd this entire time. All of this entire chapter, they never mention him. Like, he's just been hiding. And a lot of it really does feel like it's mostly just like his perspective, his tunnel vision. No one had seen him. No, he had seen him. He just didn't pay him any attention. With an opponent of her level, he hadn't thought it mattered. The truth was, Rajerd hadn't seen Edis' Sword of Light. Interesting. Damn. It was so fast, even a legendary warrior like him couldn't perceive it. And yet, Gao Falian did. Damn. That's a major caliber right there. But Gao's second strike was a different story. It wasn't anywhere near that speed. He'd swung it with a bare minimum of power he needed to cut off her head. He'd been careless. Even then, an average warrior wouldn't have had time to stop him. That had been Rajerd Superdia standing by, the veteran warrior of Dead End. He'd lived for centuries. Of course he'd stop it. Gao had misjudged Rajerd. Edis had trusted the Superb to have her back. Hell yeah, it's Papa Rajerd. If Edis had held... sorry. Earlier, I was mentioning the idea of how sad it is that Edis has finally seen Rajerd again, and she was super excited to see him, and I bet she wanted to glomp him so bad. I mean, kind of mentioned that. There's a side of me that almost expects that, like, if she did glomp on him, if she did almost act childish as she was afraid to do, Vulnerability is really what it is. Showing a little bit of vulnerability, not being so tough. Getting a little soft. Would Rajerd have trusted her as much in this fight? Right here, he's letting her go. He's shadowing her the entire time, slowly moving up. He's shadowing her. Would he have trusted that she was strong enough? I think he has a measure of her. I think he truly does have a measure of her and knowing that she's capable. Again, he called her a warrior, but enough to go up against Galfalion. And I think her keeping her composure of being strong and everything may have given that confidence to him. If Eris had held any uncertainty, if she doubted even for a moment Rajerd might stop it, then Galfalion might have had his opening. Why didn't you use a sword god style technique? Eris demanded of Gal while he lay on his back, blood dripping from her neck. The battle only lasted a moment, but her forehead was drenched with sweat. I thought I'd lose. From the first strike, if he'd used Sword of Light at top speed, he would have won, and he hadn't done that. He couldn't. In the back of his mind, he'd seen his fight with Gino Britz. He is literally, he's sort of light shy. Like he literally he's been traumatized by that. And again, that it gave us that impression with Geese meeting him. This dude is broken. What the hell happened to this dude? He looks like a wolf with his tail between his legs, whimpering over here in a corner. What the hell happened to this guy? I've always been the strongest. And this boy came up there, bam, bam, took me out. Just like that. It always takes one strike. Never had to raise it multiple times. Gino Britz jacked him up. He never doubted his sword or his skill then. And Gino had torn through both with total ease. He'd lost. He had shattered his right hand as his opponent threw him onto his ass in the training hall. He remembered everyone's eyes and Gino looking down at him. That memory had dulled his will behind his first Sword of Light. Galfalion was a genius swordsman, so it does imply here that he did do a Sword of Light. Okay, there's something wrong here. The way this is wrote out, there's something wrong here. Because she did Sword of Light, it even confirmed that she used Sword of Light, and he deflected it, using the Water God style. Galfalion was a genius swordsman. He had the name of the sword. Yeah, that's weird. We'll just blame it on Seven Seas. That's a great image, by the way. I didn't mention it earlier. That image is so freaking amazing. So yeah, it opens up, quote, Sword of Light. It doesn't say who says it. It just says she attacked with the most powerful technique, so you assume it's her. His eyes caught it for a moment, gripped his hilt of his sword. It wasn't the reflection blade. It was unmistakably Sword of Light. It just wasn't like any Sword of Light that Gal had ever seen. This is all weird. This is all worded very weird. She attacked with Sword of Light. His eyes caught it. He gripped his sword. It was unmistakably Sword of Light that she was using. It wasn't like any Sword of Light that he had seen before. And then it's, quote, Water God style technique flow. Again, the assumption this is Gal. A slippery sensation swiped across Eris's palms. From her stance with her sword raised high above her head, she struck with a Sword of Light, and it met Galfalion's lightning-fast interception strike and been deflected. So he used flow, deflected it. Where is his strike here? He didn't use it in that last attack. There's something lost here. It's not a big deal. There's something lost here. Because it makes a point of it here in a minute where he specifically chose, again right here, I chose not to use that because Gino messed him up. Not that Gino messed him up, it's just the fact that his loss to Gino messed with his own mind. That memory had dulled the will behind his first Sword of Light. Galfalion was a genius swordsman. He had the name of the sword god, but he was full of enough brilliance to rise to the Water Emperor. What? I don't think they've ever mentioned that before. I mean, he obviously knew them. He knew them. He knew Rada. He knew all those people. But right here is confirming he's gone to Emperor. But he was full enough brilliance to rise to Water Emperor if he had been in the Water God style hall. And right there is saying that he's not of that caliber, but he could reach that if he actually stayed there, I guess, or went there and studied. That was why he used Water God style technique. He was confident that he couldn't lose to that. Defiant, even. So again, his loss messed with him. And again, he confirmed that he could beat her if he used it. He got the Sword of Light shied. Like, he's afraid of using it and losing again. He's got that competitive anxiety. Is that what it's called? He's got a competitive anxiety of some sort. Like, he's afraid of losing in a battle, and so he's afraid of using it because he lost that one time. And that forces him, with his own ability to use the Water God style, to go, okay, instead, I'll just turn to Water God style and I'll counter her. I can do that. I'm of emperor. It's saying that it's enough brilliance to rise to it. So he has the ability to get to that point, and she's supposedly only Sword King, which he should know that she's much higher than Sword King. She just didn't want to go for titles. That he chose to do that instead. Again, Gino Britz, this is sad. It's sad. He couldn't have done it back when he went by the name of the Sword God. He had to act the part as Sword God. He felt a sense of duty to only use Sword God style techniques. Not this time. There was no downside to using other techniques to parry the Sword of Light. That was why he tried to provoke Edis. For that matter, cutting off Rudius' arms as Geese had instructed him. There it is. That confirmed it. Confirmed it. From that matter, cutting off Rudius' arms as Geese had instructed him was another thing he never would have done in his former position. The gears must have been out of alignment from the start, ever since he lost to Gino Britz. Galfalion's old confidence was gone along with his old strength. The greatest swordsman of them all no longer existed. This is so freaking sad, dude. This is so sad. I mean, I don't have any strong connections to Galfalion. He's snappy. He's a little dirtbag in a lot of cars. He's rough. He's a rough dude. But I don't really have anything against him or anything really for him, just because we haven't really spent too much time with him. But this is kind of tragic. The falling down from the throne, really what it is. It sucks that a lot of it is secondhand info. The fact that, yes, we don't get a chapter perspective of him fighting Gino, his fall there, his leaving the place. We just catch him when Geese finally arrives in front of him, and we get to see that he's lost his fangs at that point, can tail between leg. But yes, right here, it implies that his status of Sword God prevented him from using other styles, despite the fact that they would have technically helped him. It's the pride of the style that you cannot touch anything else. Don't use other styles. Only use your one. If he were to use Water God style to counter Gino, he might have beat Gino. But who would respect that? Wait, is he really the Sword God? He's using Water God style. It makes sense, and it sucks. But right here, he's so crippled, and he's choosing to step back to Water God style. It sucks. Like I said, this this didn't feel good. I'm happy. Yes, hell yeah, freaking Edis wrecking him and dead end right here, taking down the Sword God, former Sword God. But it feels bad. You were right. I'm a nobody who lost his nerve. He made no excuses. The person who had believed in her skill won, and the one who couldn't had lost. It was that simple. Everything he said before the battle sounded pathetic now. If he was going to make speeches like that, he should have at least tagged first. He really was a nobody. To Edis, he probably looked lower than the village drunk. The sense that he had to fight Orsted, that he couldn't end things here, that he wanted one last bit of glory, that was what pressed him to accept Geese's invitation. He couldn't believe that he thought he could challenge Orsted as he was. He could hardly bring himself to laugh at that thought. Yeah, that's a sad reality of it. Literally the moment that he lost to Gino, because he was so full of his position and his title, he became like the washed up drunk. The guy yelling at the street corner about how you guys don't know how well you have it or how things are going terrible or not caring much about society in itself in general or being a part of it. He broke from that sword sanctum and left and had nothing. It's sad how bad he fell. Who knows what I was thinking? Looking down at him, Edis thought, how pitiful. An unintelligible sadness swelled up in her as she watched this man who had once made her tremble meet his end. Do you have any last words? Gal moved just as his eyes looked up at Edis. That girl with the red hair. Ever since he first saw her, he thought that she had a gift. She was rough around the edges, but she had more raw potential than Ghislaine. But he hadn't for a second thought that she'd be the one to kill him. He'd always thought of her as below him, that if they ever fought, he'd always win. And he would have. But again, to the idea of the Etov style, everybody at your side is your own strength. Now, I do think that Edis would have confronted this fight differently if Rijerd wasn't there. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that she would have played things out the same way and get her head chopped off. I think she would have confronted this fight differently if Rijerd wasn't there. She trusted him. The sword you wield only for yourself is pure, and a pure sword is the sharpest. People change. The blade you wield for another will be strong, but it will be influenced by them. Hesitate once, and afterwards, you'll be haunted by that hesitation. Your blade will dull. That's what happened to me. I met a woman, then I had a child. I trained my students. Well, I was hung up on crap like what the sword got out to do.
I went dull.
There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. The sword you wield only for yourself is pure. And again, they got into a little bit of that when Edis first arrived up there. And the idea that she was so, like she, unlike a lot of other people, was something that he could technically mold. And it was this back and forth between the idea of having somebody to fight for or somebody just being pure strength, being driven by emotion, yada, yada, yada. Right here, he's saying, only for yourself is pure. You're solo. Have nobody else. A pure sword is the sharpest. And I think a lot of that has to do with the person that's alone will have no hesitation in battle because they have nothing to lose. Whereas I think with somebody where they have somebody else to fight for, somebody to come home to, they'll have a fear of death. And thus they won't follow through sometimes. People change. A blade you wield for another will be strong, but you'll be influenced by them. Of course. I mean, it's the simplest way to put that, and I think it's just the way over the simplification here, is that, yes, the whole thing that drove her to become as strong as she is because she wanted to stand at Rudius' side. But what comes from that, again, the very simplest way to put it, is that she no longer wants to kill the one thing that she was getting stronger for to get revenge on. She now works for Orsted, whereas before, she wanted to kill Orsted. But yes, technically, her ultimate goal was to be at Rudius' side, to be his equal, to not hold him down. But he has influenced her. Hesitate once, and afterwards, you'll be haunted by that hesitation. I think that has to do with Gino. I hesitated that one time when I fought Gino, who wanted to marry Nina. I hesitated for these children. I hesitated once, and now I'm haunted by that hesitation. Now, it could be in reference to Orsted, that back when he fought Orsted that one time, maybe he hesitated at some point. Maybe he was fighting for somebody else in that brief moment, and Orsted destroyed him. Your blade will dull. That's what happened to me. I met a woman, then had a child. I trained my students. When I was hung up on crap like what a sword god ought to do, I went dull. And yes, it gives that impression. When he got that position, he literally just sits there all day messing around. It kind of gives that impression like every time, they do training, whatever, he's going off over here to sit down in somewhere and lay down on his hammock or whatever. Like he got dull. He got settled there. Whereas most people would be traveling around getting stronger, he just settled in the Sword Sanctum. He took over the Sword Sanctum. And so he had this place that he's stuck at. As Gal's grasp on consciousness grew weaker, he felt the words continue to pour out. He didn't have anything he needed to say. He didn't have words that he wanted to leave behind. He hadn't thought about what he would say at his death. He didn't think he'd die in a place like this. His thoughts simply came pouring from his mouth.
Edis, I always knew you were something. You stayed strong. I thought you'd be taken in by love. But you're free. You're still free.
I guess what this can imply is that despite the fact that she has fallen for Rudius and now the wife of Rudius, that she would have gotten weaker. But as we always see, she's constantly still training. Every day, she's still exercising. Why? Because that's her role. The great thing is that unlike most relationships, if she were to come back there and Rudius was alone and he was single and she got married to him, and he's like, okay, well, I'm working at the University of Magic. And she's like, okay, cool. I'll take care of the house or something. Like if there was no threats there, she would have settled down. She possibly, when we're talking about Edis here, it's hard to predict what Edis would do. She could have possibly settled down and just become a housewife or something. Like there's a possibility that she wouldn't have the fear of having to train daily. Right now, the reason why she keeps training every single day and staying strong and staying sharp is because that's her role in that house, is to protect the family, protect Rudius. A thick stream of blood gurgled out of his mouth, but he didn't wipe it away. He held his sword out to Edis.
Take it.
All right. The act bore no relation to his words, but Edis accepted at once. Gal's hand, so close to death, was frighteningly cold, but grip was hot. Gal exhaled as he watched her take the sword. He didn't have enough strength to take another breath.
The strong live free. I like that.
His arm fell. Galfalion was dead. 07's rip. Rest in peace, Galfalion. Like I said, it just feels bad. This just doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good at all. Edis knelt in silence. She took the scabbard from his waist, sheathed the sword, then pushed it into her belt. Phew. She took a deep breath as she took a scroll from her pocket. It was a beginner's scroll of healing magic. She held onto it in case of emergency ever since she received it. She held it to the spot where the blood trickled from her neck, then poured mana into it. The wound closed in an instant.
Edis,
let's go help Rudius.
Yes.
With that, the two of them turned to go. But then Edis turned back, taking in Galfalion's awful corpse. She clenched her fist. She recited a spell. Long, long ago, Rudius had told Edis that if nothing else, she ought to remember this spell. She and Ghislaine had practiced it over and over again. Fireball. A flaming sphere burst from her hand and set Galfalion's body alight. Edis didn't watch as the flames engulfed it. She turned and set off quickly from that place. The fire spread to nearby trees, giving off a plume of smoke like a beacon. It went on burning, undisturbed, until the flames naturally died away. Yeah, I was kind of side of me that's thinking, like, is it going to turn one of those things where, like, as everybody else is fighting, literally the entire forest is being engulfed in flames, and the entire forest ends up just charred as everybody's trying to evacuate because Ed is just off fireball? No, it goes out. Again, feels bad. This whole thing feels bad. I don't really feel like Edis would really... I think Edis has a respect for Galfalion, but I don't think she has a respect that she has for somebody like Rejerd or Ghislaine, which is kind of interesting. You would think that with how much respect that she has for Ghislaine and Rejerd, that Galfalion would be the same. But I think a lot of that sort of just kind of flips the moment that Galfalion became her enemy. If Rejerd would become her enemy, I think she would flip pretty damn quick too. I think Edis does typically have sort of a switch that she can activate. Not that I think that she's happy about it inside, but she just knows how to flip that switch. I mean, that's like Geese. She knows Geese, but I don't think she'll hesitate at all to kill Geese. I mean, Orsid's a good example of the opposite, where she has that flip for him as well. Even though he has a curse, she has that flip for him as well, where, okay, Rudius said no, turn it off. But yeah, I don't think they ever mentioned the idea that he told her to remember Fireball. I mean, that was one of the only spells that she ended up learning, and she tried to use it on Orsid, but I don't remember him ever mentioning that. It sort of implies the idea of remembering that spell in order to get rid of corpses, like the situation with Paul. Maybe he told her about that with the situation with Paul, which, yes, technically, again, Galfalion turned into a Paul situation. He became half the man he used to be. There's something about everybody dying being split in half, which I guess technically facilitates the idea of them being able to give final words. Like with every single one of them, they always end up splitting them in half in order for them to be able to say final words, whereas if you chop somebody's head off, it makes it a little more difficult. But yeah. Again, this is a feel bad chapter. Again, super awesome, Edis and Rejerd winning, but at the same time, I did none of that. I'm curious what the chat thinks. I'm curious what y'all think. This doesn't feel good. Again, I have no connection to Galfalion whatsoever, but it feels bad, dude. Gal fell from a very high place of strength and power and authority, and through his own like desires to keep to the status quo and not use other styles, which implies that if he did, he could have won still. He fell. And not only did he fail, but he kept falling to the point now where he can't even properly fight Edis. He could have sort of light her, but he's weak. And yes, technically through the implication of him being faster than her at sort of light, and Rejerd not being able to see her sort of light, implies that he wouldn't have been able to stop Galfalion's sort of light if he used it on Edis. Again, this all sucks. Anyways, I think I've talked that to death. I think that most of this Mushoku Monday is just me saying how much this sucks. All this sucks. Anyways, we'll see who else falls in the coming chapters. Haven't even opened up chapter 5, so we'll see where it goes from here. As this is already turning out to be like a very effed up chapter, and we haven't even killed anybody that I care about yet. If we're gonna kill anybody else. But again, my current predictions right now, again, we technically have Rudius and Sander is squaring off against Alexander. We have, Zenoba and Doga, and was it somebody else? I think it was just them two, because I think, again, Sander went and joined Rudius. I think just them two, maybe somebody else was fighting the Ogre God, which I'm guessing is mostly going to be kind of, well, again, face-to-face Emperor. I can see Doga being really good at kind of possibly taking down the Ogre God, but I think a lot of what the Ogre God is going to come into is, do they have some kind of quirk kind of similar to the Immortal Demon Kings, where they're going to be able to regenerate themselves? Because there's a lot of Ogre Tales where they regenerate themselves. And so that could be a situation there where Doga's going to be chopping off parts and they just keep bringing them back. And again, the big kind of toss-up that's going to happen there is, when is Bodyguard going to show up with that armor? Because I think he's the only one that has not been mentioned that will be showing up. And there's almost a side of me that wonders if, yeah, he will end up attacking the village directly, and they're going to have to rush back there to help. Because I think that Bodigadi is going to be sent to go after Orsid directly. I think he's going to be sent to kill Orsid directly, which will probably turn into being kind of an interesting twist. The whole situation is having literally Orsid have to use more mana, and it come to where I was talking about before, them having to find an alternative way of getting in there. that doesn't require Orsted to have to be the one to use his magic. But anyways, that's it for this Mushoku Monday. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey chat, hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. Again, 07 in the chat. Rip Galfalion. I hope you guys enjoyed it as always. As per usual, greatly appreciate your guys' support, your kind words, and yes, thank you to everybody that has supported the channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships. All that stuff means a great deal to me. But yeah, leave it on a depressing note. I'll see you guys next week for the next Mushoku Monday. Until then, I'll take care. Pretty hyped these last 2 episodes. It's been pretty hyped these last 2. These 2 chapters have been. Oh my gosh, I've lost it. He's more capable than you think. He's more capable than you think. Even North Emperor Doga managed that. It would have been utterly bizarre. Stop saying it. It would have been utterly